This is Evangelist George McTire of the Word of God Ministry, and I know I have a lot of you wondering, what is this video about? Well, to tell you exactly what it's about, as I entitled it, it's called Plantation Politics. And essentially what I am going to show you is that the Democratic Party is using plantation politics to remain in the position that it is in as it pertains to the black community in this nation. Now, just to give you a little brief outline on what I mean by plantation politics, what is it? Plantation politics is a system much like that in the times of slavery, where the masters were able to control their slaves by the use of fear and overseers. Now, overseers were usually other slaves. They weren't always other slaves per se. They could have been poor whites as well. If you looked at the movie Roots, you saw people like this white guy that was poor white guy that was put in a position of being an overseer over the slaves. And you also had, if I'm not mistaken, the character Fiddler in some aspects was an overseer, but an overseer basically was another poor white, or in some instances, and in a lot of instances, they were black slaves that the master had in the midst of the slaves to keep him informed on what they, the slaves, were up to. You know, there's a lot of times that, in slavery times, if the slaves were planning something, they definitely wouldn't do it or try to do it or carry it out or anything when there's somebody white around. So the master came up with the idea of, if he can get one of the slaves to inform on the other slaves, then that would make it easier for him to know what they were thinking, and to, in the case of if they were planning on doing any rebelling against him or something, he could nip that in the bud, because he would have an informant on the inside of the slave community there. And what he would do is he would reward this slave and this slave's family. If the slave happened to have a family, give them more food, more rations, treat them a lot better than anything. There was always some benefit that this one slave, the overseer, would get for essentially keeping the other slaves in line. Now, as I said, the master used the overseer to do several things. First thing, as I said, keep the slaves in line. The second thing he would do was inform the master when the slaves were thinking about rebellion or running away. Not only this, but the overseer also had the ability, and sometimes he was given the authority, to actually punish those slaves that were the ringleaders or the main troublemakers, if you will, amongst the slaves. Now that is in a nutshell. I mean, there are a whole lot of different variations to the relationship between the slaves, the masters, and the overseers. But you would always wonder how it was that a few slave owners on a plantation were able to keep control over thousands, hundreds or thousands of slaves, and their, with the families, the men, the women, the children. How were they able to do it? They were able to do it because of the overseer. And in a lot of instances, the slaves didn't know which of their fellow slaves was actually the overseer, because a lot of this stuff was kept in secret. It had to be, because otherwise the slaves would turn on the overseer and do him some harm or something like that. So they didn't know, so they had to be careful. They had to basically watch everything that they said and did, because they didn't know who it was that was actually informing on them. So this is basically the outline, or the condensed version of the relationship between the overseer, the master, and the slaves, the overseer being the middleman, so to speak. Now, to put that into perspective today with the Democratic Party in relation to the black community today, you got to remember this. The Democratic Party was founded on slavery. In other words, 90-some% of all of the slave owners, when slavery became illegal, and after the Civil War and so forth, and the South lost the wars to keep keep their slaves, because they want to secede from the Unions, they still held to the fact that they wanted to be the masters over the black community, or over the slaves or the Negro. So what they did is they formed their party, and they had the things with the Ku Klux Klan and so forth, things using fear and stuff to try to keep blacks in line and in control, under their feet and under control. But as time went on, these techniques that they were using, which is founded under, if you've ever heard of the Willie Lynch letters, if you can go online, there's a book called Had, Hoodwinked, and Bamboozled: How Willie Lynch is Running Wild in the Democratic Party and has the black community just where he wants them. If you get that book, it is basically a in-depth look at the Willie Lynch letters, the techniques that Willie Lynch told the slave owners to use, and how the Democratic Party today is following those steps basically word for word. Now, getting back into plantation politics, the biggest thing going right now to keep the black community in a position of being enslaved to the Democratic Party is as I mentioned, from the plantation times, as I mentioned earlier, the use of fear and overseers. But see, today, the overseer today is still a black man who is a servant, if you will, of the Democratic Party, or the masters, with the Democratic Party being masters, being the white liberals. The overseer is the black man that these liberal white Democratic politicians use to keep the black community in line with the Democratic Party. If you will look at any time when Democrats are running against Republicans and it looks like the Republicans might win an election, the first thing you will have happen is that the overseers will come out and they will essentially go around and try to tell blacks that you need to get out and vote, you need to get out en masse, we have to defeat this Republican, because this Republican, if they win, you're going to lose your benefits, you're going to lose your health care, you're going to be put out in the street, this is going to go wrong, that's going to go wrong. They are using fear to keep you in line with the Democratic Party and the liberal white establishment of that party, which is still rooted and grounded in slavery. Now, naming some of these overseers, two right off of the bat, Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton. You ever wonder, every time there's some problem somewhere in the black community, Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, one of the two of them, and there are others, I'm just naming the two that are more prominent right now, Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton. You ever notice whenever there's any sort of problem going on, a racial problem, the first people on the scene, or the first people that are called by blacks, is either Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton. I mean, these people fly all over the country. They fly. Because you know, like I say, they're all over the place. Now, you tell me this: where do they get all of this money to be doing all of this stuff? They say, well, you know, they got these organizations and things, and people pay dues and so forth. Yeah. Well, you can look at it like that as well, but because these are overseers, the Democratic Party pays them to get out and stir up the black community, pays them to get out and keep a eye on the pulse of the black community when it looks like some blacks might be deciding, well, you know, I'm tired of the Democratic Party because they aren't doing anything for black folks, and I think I might go independent or switch to the Republican Party. Here comes Jesse Jackson, here comes Al Sharpton, here comes the rest of them, warning about this black person just thinking about leaving the Democratic Party. They're a traitor to their race. They are being hoodwinked and bamboozled by the Republicans. I had to laugh about that. Being hoodwinked and bamboozled by the Republican, doing everything they can to keep blacks in line. You know, it reminds me of the story that I used to hear where I believe Louis Farrakhan, Malcolm X, and some other black leaders used to talk about the situation where on a plantation the slave was never allowed in the master's house. In fact, it was off limits to him, unless of course it was something like I said, the overseer might occasionally get a chance to come into the master's house, but for the most part blacks weren't allowed in the house. Now the black women were allowed in the house because they cooked the meals for the master and things, or babysit the master's kids and so forth. But essentially, blacks were not allowed into the master's house. Neither was the overseer or the slave or anything else like that. Yet, as they would tell it, I think Louis Farrakhan talked about it, and I think Malcolm X did too. You let the master's house catch on fire, and who would be the first one there to help try to put the fire out and actually risk their lives to save the master's house? The slave, the overseer, and the other slaves that he would get to come to help put the master, help put the master's, put the fire out of the master's house. And then after they managed to get the fire house, the slave would stand up and say, "Well, boss, we almost lost our house, didn't we?" Now, see, the slave was so ignorant that he thought that the master and him were family, and that the master's house was actually part of his house. Well, today we got the Jesse Jacksons and the Al Sharptons and things running around trying to protect the house of the white liberal slave masters known as the Democratic Party by running around trying to help keep the Democrats in power so that they can say, "Well, boss, we got another victory here. We saved the party. You still in control," and so forth. Now, all along now, these individuals, I'm not going to call them what I was thinking about calling them, but these individuals, talking about Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, and the others of that ilk, and it's amazing how a lot of these are preachers. The bottom line is that the white liberal establishment that Jesse and Al are so busy trying to protect their party really does not care one iota about them at all, period. See, the whole focus of the white liberal racist of the Democratic Party is the fact that they want to maintain their ability to have slaves. But see, they can't do it in an overt way now because, that's illegal. So what they do is they use other means. They use the economy. They use loss of jobs. They use the fear of loss of being on welfare. I mean, what's the best way to keep people in line and devoted to your party if you hold the purse strings and control who gets welfare, who doesn't get welfare, who gets medical benefits, who doesn't get medical benefits. I mean, you can go on and on. Everything that the Democratic Party is based on or founded on is the idea of slavery. But see, it's been so much more profitable to them now, because not only can they enslave blacks, they can enslave whites and all the other minorities in this nation. And then, once you get them to the point where you put them on welfare or give them benefits or something, put them on the government dole, so to speak, as President Obama said when he was doing the health care thing, and Republicans were telling everybody, all of the problems that were going to crop up because of health care. President Obama said he wanted to get the thing passed and then dare the Republicans to come in and try to shut it down. Well, see, all of that is just the idea of the fact this how the Democrats practice this plantation politics. They set up circumstances. They know that the more people that are dependent on government are likely to vote and support the very party that put them in that position in the first place, because now that party has essentially become the controller or the master over these people's destiny. You listen to how many people, when it comes down to election time, how many of them are complaining about the fact, what are they going to do without the Democratic Party? There's no jobs, there's no this, there's no that. And, it goes on and on and on. And leading the way are the overseers, Jesse and Al. So essentially, we have the situation now where we say, well, Barack Obama's the president, so you would say I must be wrong, because why would Barack Obama, if the Democrats were that much into trying to keep everybody slaves, why would Barack Obama, why would they sit still and let Barack Obama be president? Good question. I'm going to talk about that on another video, but let me put it to you like this. Barack Obama may be president, but being president is only a situation that the Democrats, they didn't want to have it happen like that. They would have rather had Hillary Clinton as win and be president, but they saw that the tide as far as the black community was concerned is here was a black man that a lot of the blacks decided they wanted to have as president, and they weren't going to vote if Hillary Clinton won the election. So what would a wise master do in a situation like that? He's faced with the situation of this black man attaining the office of President of the United States, which is something they really did not want to have happen. But then they got to thinking. They said, if this black man does attain the office of president, then he's going to bring in more support from the black community like we've never had it before. Not only that, but other Democrats all over the country are going to be swept in, riding in on his coattails, so to speak, to help the Democrats gain full control of the House and Senate, as well as the White House, so that they can have total power and control like they had back in the Carter administration. So what they did is they allowed him to do this. Now, mind you, presidents, even though they are the president, they are not really the ones that run the nation. It's the Senate and the U.S. Congress. The Congress is the one that handles most of the spending, while the Senate is the one that handles the legislation from the judicial side and so forth like that. In other words, the president of the United States, even though he does have a lot of power, he's the commander-in-chief and so forth, but essentially he cannot do anything without the approval of the U.S. Congress and the U.S. Senate. He does have certain powers where he can go over them, but that's why we have our system set up with a separation of powers where no one person can just come in and do whatever it is they want to do. But in this instance, the liberals, the white Democrats, saw the opportunity of gaining full control of Washington. Now, when we look at President Obama, he's like the head overseer, so to speak, of everybody else, including the black community, because as far as everybody else in the black community is, everybody in the black community is concerned, because President Obama is black, that anything he says they're willing to do. They don't argue with him, and anybody that says anything against him, they're a traitor to the race, they're this, they're that. So while Barack Obama might be the president, he's still being controlled by white liberals. It's just the fact it's all behind the curtain, so to speak. In other words, it's like you've heard the title of being given to some people as being a puppet candidate, or well, I'm getting ready to give the thing out now. Have you ever seen the movie The Manchurian Candidate? It's a story about. It's a movie. There's two of them. The latest one, the one I looked at more recently, was the one with Denzel Washington as the one that starred with Denzel Washington. And what it was about is that certain high-powered people had set up a situation where they wanted to take control of government, but they had to have somebody that was brainwashed and that was under their control to actually be in the position of being the president. And see, they would control the nation by controlling what this particular president did. In fact, the person was brainwashed that they had to set up to run for president, and they had everything set up where they were going to make sure he got elected. And they almost got away with it, but Denzel Washington was seeing certain things wrong with this guy, because the guy used to be a close friend of his in the military or something, and he was seeing the way the guy was thinking and acting and things, and he knew something was wrong because he was having flashbacks of certain incidents, and a lot of the stuff didn't make sense. We're going to find out he had been partially brainwashed himself, and Denzel Washington kept on digging at this stuff and things, and they finally got all of the stuff to light after he had convinced his friend that his friend had actually been brainwashed and that people were controlling him, including his mother. And so the end result is that the plan was foiled. The guy uh, got killed, so he never did attain the office, and it killed him and his mother at the same time. Uh, so the situation is this type of stuff. You see it in the movies, and you think, well, this can't be real. Yes, it can be. But see, the Democrats and the Democratic Party, see, they run that party like a plantation. You go against the party, and they're going to get rid of you one way or the other. Look what happened to Joe Lieberman. Joe Lieberman was a Democratic senator who, on a lot of instances, split with the Democratic Party and sided with the Republicans on certain issues. Well, plantation politics says they can't have that. So you know what they did? They ostracized him. They got another candidate to run against him, another Democrat to run against him, and actually funded the other guy who did beat him for the Democratic nomination for the Senate. Well, Joe Lieberman ran as an independent for his seat again, and the people voted for Lieberman, so that Lieberman is now an independent rather than being a Democrat. The point is, the Democratic Party runs their party like a plantation. You can't be a dissenter, you can't compromise, you can't do anything. When they talk about the fact that the Republicans don't compromise on things, the Democrats are the ones that don't do the compromising, because they have yet to compromise with Republicans on anything, substantive that will essentially lead to people being able to be independent and free of having to depend on government. Anything that comes up that has a hint of allowing or making it possible for people to get off of the government dole and be independent and do things for themselves, Democrats are against that, and they will not stand for it. That's what I mean when I'm saying the Democrats are playing plantation politics. And that's something we all have to be aware of. That's something that we all have to deal with in all of these elections and things. Yeah, I mean, you can look at any election that comes up and listen to the fear and things that the Democrats are always talking about, trying to keep people in line, supporting them, and the uneducated, which is another thing. You can't have intelligent slaves. That's why you think the public school system keeps on graduating kids in schools in the urban communities. Why they keep graduating kids out of school that can't even hardly fill out a job application. I mean, these are kids that have graduated from school, from high school, supposed to be ready to take their place in society, and the only thing they're good for is to get a job at Burger King or get on welfare, being dependent on government. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about plantation politics that the Democratic Party is playing. And if the black community does not wake up and smell the coffee, well, you wonder why we support the Democratic Party to the tune of over 90% of us support the Democratic Party exclusively, but yet and still the black community is still dead last when it comes down to any issue that is good. We're at the bottom of the list. When it's anything that's bad, like crime, disease, poverty, illiteracy and stuff, we're at the top of the list. That's not by accident, that's by design. Designed by a party that's playing plantation politics. So I hope you got something out of this message today. If you notice, I didn't use any biblical scriptures, because usually I would use them, but I figure I would just talk to you straight out and to the point so that you can understand where I can reach. Because there's a lot of you, somebody start bringing up Bible scripture, you don't want to hear it no way. So but the message is still out that we have to do something, and what we have to do is get us some education and research this product, because like I said, the book Had, Hoodwinked, and Bamboozled: How Willie Lynch is Running Wild in the Democratic Party. If you know the nature of the former slave owners, if you know the foundation of the party, if you know what the goals of the party are, the evidence is right there in front of you if you could just look at it. If you do all of that, then you will understand what I mean when I say the Democratic Party is playing plantation politics. They got their overseers, Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, and a lot of these other black leaders, a lot of whom are preachers, going out protecting the very people that they actually should be railing against, but because they're getting some benefits, getting some cash under the table, being able to fly all over the place, go all over the country, and sometimes go to other countries and things, and fit right in and things, and have themselves a little power and so forth. They think they into something. But see, that's the way the master overseer relationship goes. And then somebody comes up and says something against them, and the first thing they want to do is ostracize the person. And even if the person has good ideas to help bring black folks into a position where they can be independent or not have to depend on government, and they're black, they get shot down. So, you take it or leave it. Whether you want to believe this or not, that's up to you. But like I say, the evidence is out there. All you have to do is look at it, have the courage to look at it, do the research, and check it out for yourself whether or not I'm telling you. Get away from the idea of thinking that the Republican Party is your enemy. It's the Democratic Party, hands down, that is the enemy, because they still want to be what they were 300 and some odd years ago. They want to be the masters, and they want us to be the slaves. Good day.